What's going on, internet? Hope you guys are doing well. Today we're going to be looking at a song I wrote called Just Add Water. It sounds a little bit like this. And we're going to be breaking down the project from start to finish in Logic, going through the plugins that I use, the recording process, the writing process. And I just wanted to break this stuff down from start to finish. A little bit of context about why I'm making this video is A, these are the videos that I really love to watch. I think we can kind of nerd out for a little bit and just kind of talk about the process here. B, these are the kind of videos that I wish I had access to when I was a kid and when I started the recording process. And just a disclaimer, I am no beans an expert here. I am not a professional. I am a hobbyist. I do this on the weekends and in evenings when the kids are asleep and when I'm not at work. And these are a lot of just things that I've picked up from a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of forums online, and just conversations that I've had with others kind of throughout the process. So if this video can help one person get a little bit quicker or get a little bit of insight about how to make a better recording, then I figured this is something, good that kind of came out of the video. And if the worst thing that happens is you waste a little bit of time with me, I apologize. But let's start with hearing the whole project from start to finish. So that's the entire project from start to finish. There's guitars in there, there's bass, there's drums. It's pretty basic. And to give you some context about how I went about coming up with the idea, with most of my ideas, it's pretty much a guitar riff right out the gate. In this case, it was this little ditty right here. So nothing too exciting, but essentially, way you get that sound is just going directly in from the guitar. In this case, it was a PRS Custom 24, going directly into the front of the interface. The DI, if I were to listen to it, really sexy. And that's the nice part about recording with plugins in general, is it gives you the ability to really play with that sound. So as long as you have a clean DI going into the signal, you can really reamp it as many times as you want. I can take that signal and go directly out to my Kemper. I can reamp it that way, or I can reamp it in real time just using the actual plugin, which is, it's a time saver to say the least, and it just really kind of maximizes your workflow and maximizes your time. So, but going back to the start of the song, a couple of things I want to talk about actually before we do that is a little concept called top-down mixing. So essentially what this means is you're actually putting on some plugins on your master bus to shape the sound in one way or another, whether that's an EQ or what have you. So in this case, on my master bus, I have Easy Mix 2. I have a mastering plugin called Air Width, just as a limiter and just a little bit of lift to it. And if I actually play the song in context, you lose a fair amount of volume without having Easy Mix on. So I went ahead and have that on, just going directly into the sound. The next thing that I have is Soothe 2 from Oka Sound. And essentially what this is kind of like a de-esser. Really, it just kind of makes the listening a little bit easier on the ears. So it's just a little bit more harsh on the ears. It just takes a little bit of that hiss off and just makes it a little bit more of a pleasant listening experience. So the reason that I do top-down mixing is because when you're writing, for me, a lot of it's feel. I have to be able to kind of feel the music a little bit, and it's just easier to do that when it kind of sounds better. So that's one reason why I've tried recording just direct in with a DI, and I just can't get into the groove of the music. So it's really helpful to either monitor the recording either through the plugin, or just using headphones, or the input monitoring through Logic is another way of doing it too. So, but going back to the start of the song, now that we've kind of talked about the top-down mixing approach, it sticks off with some drums. So starting with the, actually we'll start with the guitar. So there's a little bit of a radio effect there, as you'll hear. Nothing super crazy, but what this is actually an Archetype Nolly plugin using the 5150 amp, and it's just a radio effect preset. You're going to see a lot of presets in here. That's going to be a pretty common theme. I find that when you're writing, the more that stuff just kind of gets out of your way, makes things a little bit easier for you. So the presets, flip them on and go. The nice thing about the neural DSP stuff is a lot of the presets are kind of just excellent right out the gate. And I just found this was a nice way of kind of setting up the song going into it. So you also get to hear some drums here. So starting off with the drums as a whole, just so you know what I'm using, it's a contact instrument. It's It's the GetGood Drum library from GetGood Drums. It's Matt Halpern's P4 kit that they used on Hail Stan. I've actually really been enjoying this kit. It has a little bit of turbo on it. It's another preset, Nolly's favorite kit, whatever that means. And you'll see that I did a little bit of mixing inside the actual plugin in terms of the drums, kind of turned on the room a little bit in certain areas, just to kind of give it a little bit of a better sit in the mix, or a better place to sit in the mix, I should say. But I exported that out and then did a low cut on it to go ahead and kind of give it that radio effect. And then the last note is just full on, no effect on it, removed the fast filter, and then also have a bass and a bass kind of come in on that last note to kind of give everything just a little bit more oomph, and you'll see the guitars kind of come in as well. So that's how I did that. The drums I have out through a couple different pieces. So the kick, the snare, the toms, the rides, the overheads, the room, etc. Kind of have that all going out to individual channels. Every part of the drum kit is going to its separate bus. So bus number 2, which is have a parallel compressor on it. I have that turned down just a little bit because it was adding a little bit oomph, but a nice good way to kind of get some bigger drum sounds. And to be clear, you don't have to use this kit. There's a lot of different ways you can go about this. So I used Tune Track for a while. Easy Drummer 2 was something that I did for a very long time. Logic has a free one that you can use. You can get some online that are free too. Just do a quick Google search. You'll see some stuff. And again, on that note, you don't actually have to be using Logic. There's a lot of DAWs that are available nowadays that are free, that have some pretty decent stock plugins that you can actually kind of get started with. So this is just, again, my approach and kind of works best for me, but you can mimic these same processes and kind of use it anywhere you go. So essentially, a big thing that I'll do from a drum perspective is I'll kick everything out to a second bus. And what that does is just kind of reinforces the sound. It's kind of similar to double tracking guitars, but I'll show you what it sounds like. So if I go ahead and just select all the drums and I solo them, that's just the normal sound. I'm gonna go ahead and deactivate the bus. I'm actually good. So a pretty significant loss of volume, but also a little bit of a loss of clarity. But that's also with the compressor on there. So, but essentially what I'll do is I'll push that to, like I said, a bus, and then I'll put a separate compressor on there. In this case, I'm using Smash and Grab also from GetGood. I'm a big fan of their products as well. You'll see them and a lot of neural DSP on almost everything that I do nowadays. And just throw the parallel compressor on here. I messed a little bit with the settings, but it's enough where if I were to turn that off, I don't know if that's coming really clear through the YouTube with their compression, but from here it makes a pretty significant difference. Turn that down a little bit because at full volume, it was a little too much. So coming down a little, around -4 is kind of where it's at really nice. And then going back to the main kit one more time, I want to talk about the compressors that I have on there. So again, it's Smash and Grab on almost everything. Grab setting on the kick, the snare, the toms, and then I think I have the Smash setting, yeah, on the hats and the cymbals, and I believe the room too, yeah. And these made a pretty significant difference right out the gate. So, I mean, I think that's a massive difference. And I think the drum kit actually sounds great. Snare really comes through. It's like a just a beefy snare. Anyway, so that's the drums. I think they sit in the mix very well. Let's talk about the bass here for a second. Yep, sorry. A nice gritty tone to it. And that's just kind of a sound that I fell in love with. I mean, it's that, I don't have a Dingwall bass, but it has that Dingwall growl to it that I guess I just associate with Dark Glass. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Sorry, Dark Glass. But I just think this plugin sounds phenomenal. So this is the Dark Glass Ultra plugin from NeuralSP. Again, they have the vintage circuit and the B7 circuit. I love this one for more of a modern rock sound. And then I also have another copy of Soothe on top of it just to demodify it a little bit. So cutting the highs and just kind of controlling a little bit of the top end of the low end, or I don't know what the phrase is, but you get the idea. And one thing that'll do is it is going into an Avalon DI, a U5. I've used the U5 on every bass recording that I have done since 2009. I went to, one of my bandmates told me about it, and we went to go record at some friend's house, and he had one, and he just sold me on it, and I went ahead and bought it that next day, and I've used it on literally everything. It's just a phenomenal DI. So use that going directly in. If I cut that, that's just the raw bass sound. That's just the DI and the bass, nothing else. And I think the distortion on the bass helps it sit very nice in the mix. And another technique that I'll do is I'll kind of blend a DI signal of the bass with the Dark Glass, and that helps me kind of shape it a little bit. But in this case, it actually added too much mud. I think it was just too much. So I went ahead and cut it and just left the dark less and the DI on there. So that's what we're doing from a bass perspective. Going into the main section for the rhythm guitars, just using the Fortin Cali plugin. And when I showed you that earlier, this little section here. So essentially, I bought this plugin. I actually got the trial for it first. And that was the first thing that I kind of just was playing with, and it's just wanted to try it out. I found a preset, again, another preset. I think this is a Jason Frankhauser preset. Put that in there, Sunset Stripper Rhythm. Fantastic. So tars, pan hard left, pan hard right. And this is another point to talk about. So when you're double tracking or just tracking in general, I try to take the approach of programming the drums, tracking the guitar, reprogramming the drums, tracking the guitar again. As I kind of shape the overall drumming section, that's really kind of identifying where the hits are coming from. So it was important for me as I'm writing this section to kind of really hone in on those. The reason being is that what it does is when you combine everything together, it gives everything a nice... It sounds like it's one fluid sound. It's not necessarily three different pieces of instruments. They're all playing together in unison where it kind of just really comes together in a bigger way. At least that's what's going on in my head. I don't know. We'll see. And then for the lead, what I did was in the left ear, we have the Polini plugin, which is probably my favorite one, Amp 3 on there. I have the compressor, the overdrive. I put a little bit of shaping on the EQ, using a Ribbon 160 on both, and then the delay and the reverb, right? Just a quarter note delay. And then for the right, I am using the Fortin Cali, another preset. I think it's also Overdrive 1. Yeah, Overdrive 1, with the hex drive and the Zool. I'm sorry, Zool's not on, but just the hex drive. And then what I did is I backed it up with the Polini. So essentially deactivated the cab on here and pushed everything out through the reverb and the delay on this side. So I thought that was a good way of kind of combining them because there's no delay, there's no reverb on the Cali. It was kind of a good way to kind of combine them. And I just have gotten so used to it at this point. So that's essentially what's going to happen in this first section. So it goes back to a little bit of a that radio section that we started with the Nolly plugin, and then just right into the second verse. So in this section, the guitars are separate, but I actually played two separate octaves, like so two separate parts of the back. And to my ear, it just kind of pulled the part out of the song a little bit. Actually, hearing it back, this wasn't as tight as I maybe would have liked it, but I did just want to kind of run through the project, finish it, and kind of move on. There's so many times where I start a project and don't finish it. I've been trying to make a point to really see it through regardless of how the end product kind of goes, and I can always go back and repolish it if need be. But nice little pitch harmonic there. So now we go into this little section where the synths come in. And to break that down, I have them all going into a straight bus. There's 5 here, but really 2 of them are muted. I just took them out because I didn't didn't sit in the final mix very well, but air bells, soft synth bells, and the knocking echoes. And if you're wondering what these green freeze marks are, a lot of these plugins are actually pretty intensive on your CPU. So this is a feature where you freeze the track, essentially exports it and essentially just stops it from actually using your processing power and kind of treats it as just a raw audio file. So just look at the CPU usage is pretty high, and I have a good portion of these frozen just for the recording of this. Anyway, so essentially it goes into this, and there's a new part of the guitar that comes in. So essentially what we're doing here, again, straight into the interface from the guitar, going into the Cali, using the reverb and the delay from the Plini, but before going directly into the interface, going into a phase 90, basically set to about like almost all the way. It's just a classic phase pattern. But when you add it actually with the synth, and then going into this part where everything goes up a little bit of an octave, and everything just kind of, and I don't think that stuff comes through in the final recording, but it's like these little things that kind of, at least to me, make it kind of it all come together a little bit, right? And then there's another guitar solo that kind of happens. So again, I have these panned left and right, and I have two separate recordings, so two performances panned left and right. And that's a big part of making the sound bigger, is that it's those little mistakes in between the two recordings that kind of add it to make it a little bit more like I guess a stereo sound. Sorry, I hit the mic, but it really contributes to that big guitar sound that a lot of people search for. And I always tell people is you don't have to buy anything for that. That's all just a playing the same performance very closely, panning it left and right, and you're going to get a pretty significant change to your sound. One thing I did skip over. So this section, I did double it with Modern and Massive, also from GetGood, just a different kit essentially. And what I did is mostly just the floor tom to kind of make this part stand out a little bit, this little triplet. And then for the actual guitars, what I did is when I recorded it, I actually cut the audio in between. So it really just kind of, it really shows where it kind of just cuts through. And this little section here is just really to kind of add a little bit more emphasis. It's really just playing an octave of the same part of the solos. And it maybe sounds a little disjointed when you're playing them solo, but when you add them all together with the mix, I think it all kind of comes together very nicely. And then for that last part, I just took the phaser off, so it's just these. Oh no, it's still on there. I'm sorry, it's still on there. But the synths go away, so it really just kind of stands out. And again, I doubled it with the Modern and Massive, so that's really it. I mean, it's nothing super complicated, and it basically about a week I kind of put all this together, and kicked it out. So you can see the full playthrough on the channel. I'll link it up in the description. But I think that this is an incredible sound for someone doing it in their house. And I don't mean that to brag. I just mean that these are tools that are readily available for most people. You can get a lot of this stuff on a free trial and see if you like it. And most of it's the cost of a pedal or something like that. I mean, Soothe you don't necessarily even need, but the archetype stuff, or the dark glass, or even the drums are not that expensive, or the cost of just a nice pedal. So you can get the sound in your house. And again, this is stuff that I wish that I had access to when I was a kid. I just didn't. And now that I do, it's kind of like a toy, where you can just kind of sit down and knock this stuff out. So I hope this was informative. I hope, if nothing else, it kind of starts a dialogue, with you guys in terms of what you think it's working and what's not. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing at home to your own recordings. And a lot of this stuff, again, is not coming from an expert, but just someone that took a lot of time, trial and error, forums, YouTube, and kind of put this stuff together. So nothing groundbreaking, but hopefully it can get somebody off their feet. And appreciate you guys checking it out. Hope you have a good day. Take care.